The instant my stepfather Harold raised his hand at my wedding reception, I knew everything was about to go to hell. I'm Emily Carson, 29 years old. And what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life at a suburban California venue turned into a nightmare that led to consequences he never saw coming. Harold was hammered, his fourth bourbon making him sway as he snatched the microphone right in the middle of the toasts. He started with jabs about my family's past, calling it a broken mess from my mother's depression after my dad walked out, implying I was damaged goods not worthy of any marriage. The 250 guests went dead silent. My cousin Laura dropped her plate and it shattered loud. My mother, in-law Patricia, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She'd always looked down on me at family dinners, whispering about my unstable background. But Harold wasn't done. He announced he'd funded this entire wasteful event and was cutting the open bar right then and there because he'd already spent way too much on my stupid ideas. He actually used the words "stupid ideas" about my life with Thomas. Then came the worst part. He said I should be grateful he'd kept me around after Mom died. Like I was some charity case he pitied. The bartender froze mid-beer. My friends gasped. Then he turned to me. Face, beat, too red, slapped me hard across the face, and screamed, "Get out!" in front of everyone. The sting burned, but I stood up slowly, my wedding dress rustling in the silence. Thomas reached for me, but I gently pulled away. I took the mic from his hand and said the party was over. Guests could take the centerpieces home. Then I smiled. The same smile I'd perfected over years of his put-downs, and walked right out, my veil trailing behind like I owned the place. Thomas followed, that loyal husband of mine, but not before his best man accidentally spilled a drink all over Harold's rented tux. Perfect timing. What Harold never bothered to learn was that my mother left me tools to handle this one day. Before I go on, tell me what time you're watching and what city you're in, so I know how far my story has reached. Thanks. Hit that like button. Drop your worst family drama in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like this. Harold wasn't supposed to hijack the toasts, but with his fourth bourbon in hand, he had other plans. He tapped the mic, sending feedback screeching through the room, making everyone wince, then launched into what he called his real talk for the couple. He mocked how I'd snagged Thomas despite my complicated background, making my mother's depression sound like some family curse. She'd been gone 4 years, yet he weaponized her memory to paint us all as flawed. The ballroom went quiet, except for the clicking of Patricia's necklace as she nodded slightly. She'd always seen me as not quite good enough for her son. Coming from an unstable home, Harold kept going, declaring he'd bankrolled this whole fantasy wedding and was shutting down the open bar immediately because he'd already blown too much on my stupid ideas. Then he said I owed him for taking me in after Mom died, like I was some burden he pitied. The bartender stopped pouring mid-drink. My friends gasped. I stood up, my white gown rustling. Thomas tried to grab my hand, but I needed to handle this myself. I walked right up to Harold, who was smirking, expecting tears. Instead, I took the mic calmly and announced the reception was over. Everyone could grab the centerpieces and go home. Then I turned and walked out, my train flowing behind me like I owned the moment. Thomas caught up outside, the amazing man he is, while his best man had already dumped a drink down Harold's shirt. Perfect timing. Harold never learned that my mother was a brilliant real estate developer. Her systems built Jenkins Realty from nothing into millions through the property algorithms she created. The stupid ideas, he mocked. I'd inherited her sharp mind and her habit of keeping meticulous records. 2 days later, while we skipped our Hawaii honeymoon, I sat in pajamas eating mint chocolate chip ice cream for comfort. That's when Kevin Morales showed up with his gear and an envelope that changed everything. 2 days after the wedding disaster, while Thomas and I skipped our Hawaii honeymoon, Kevin Morales knocked on our door. Kevin was our wedding photographer. But more importantly, he'd worked with my mother 2 decades earlier at Property Dynamics. He said he'd wrestled with whether to come forward. But after seeing Harold slap me, he couldn't stay quiet. My mother had given him something to hold on to and deliver to me only if Harold ever crossed the line. Ruining my wedding qualified. The envelope had a key to a safety deposit box at Central Bank, plus a note in her handwriting. For my brilliant daughter, trust your gut. The truth always surfaces. Thomas wanted to come with me, but he was stuck fielding calls from Patricia, who flipped between sympathy and subtle hints that we should have just eloped to avoid the drama. Like it was somehow my fault. Thomas grew up in a family where conflict meant quiet disappointment, not public slaps. So he struggled but stood by me completely. The safety deposit box held 3 things: her real will, a USB drive, and a leather journal full of her notes. The will was dated 3 months before her death, properly notarized, leaving the house, the company, and the patents to me at age 30, just 5 months away. But Harold had produced a different version after she died, putting himself in control until I turned 35. His version was dated days before her end, when she was on heavy meds in the hospital. I remember that week. She couldn't even hold a cup, let alone sign papers. The USB contained damning emails between Harold and his attorney discussing how to restructure the inheritance for his maximum benefit, drafts of the fake will, notes on cooperative witnesses, and worst of all, Harold's own admission that Mom never agreed to any of it. Jenkins Realty kept her maiden name for credibility and grew from a small firm into a major player entirely on her revolutionary real estate software patents, the ones she coded late at night while I did homework at the kitchen table. Those algorithms now power major deals for big corporations. Inside the safety deposit box at Central Bank, I found 3 things that changed everything. The fake will was full of holes. Witnesses included his poker buddy, who was out of state that week, and a notary whose license had expired 2 years earlier. Sloppy work from a man, too arrogant to cover his tracks properly. But the assets were tied up. Harold had shifted funds into business investments and refinanced the house 3 times. Proving fraud would require more evidence. Victor suggested digging into the big state contract Harold had been bragging about for months, worth $50 million over 6 years. But it required clean ownership of all intellectual property. No disputes. Samantha, his 25-year-old girlfriend, 5 years younger than me, had been at the wedding in a dress that cost more than some people's cars. She'd lunged for the bouquet, acrylic nails flashing as she pushed past my college friends. She'd been posting the whole disaster online with captions like "wedding chaos," "new money vibes," "partner perks." The comments tore her apart. My phone kept buzzing. First concerned relatives, then Harold, starting with 1 call, then 10, then 20. His voicemails went from demanding I apologize for overreacting to panicked pleas about the family business to outright threats of slander suits, even though he was just repeating his own actions. Victor Klein was 78, semi-retired, and thrilled to hear from me. He'd been my mother's lawyer before Harold switched her to his buddy for a family discount. Victor never trusted Harold, and being proven right after all these years seemed to energize him more than his afternoon espresso. His assistant, Lauren Brooks, my high school mean girl who'd mocked my hand, me, down close, recognized me immediately and said, "Thank God you're here. We've been waiting for you to connect the dots. Your mom was brilliant, and that guy is a leech." Lauren had grown up, gotten her paralegal certification, and developed a strong sense of justice. She'd been secretly copying files for years, waiting for someone to care enough to look. That afternoon, Victor Klein's office smelled like leather and coffee when I walked in. He laid out the case with dramatic flair. The real will was rock solid, the fake one full of holes. We needed evidence on the contract. Lauren had done her own digging and found out Daniel Foster, Harold's business partner, had been trying to exit the partnership for a year, but Harold kept blocking him with legal maneuvers. Daniel had even hired his own forensic accountant to review the books, but Harold threatened to ruin his reputation over misunderstandings about ownership structure. The state contract was the key. It required undisputed IP. Harold had been filing paperwork claiming sole invention rights, conveniently leaving out my mother's name on all the original patents. I made an anonymous tip to his biggest competitor, Prime Estates, suggesting they look into Jenkins Realty's patent history before the state made their final decision. Then I called the Government Accountability Office fraud hotline just to be thorough. According to Aunt Evelyn, Harold's sister, who'd always been kind to me, he'd installed new security cameras at the office, hired a private investigator to follow me, and started accusing employees of being spies. He'd even fired his longtime assistant because she'd asked about discrepancies in the patent documentation. Meanwhile, Samantha was living her best life, completely oblivious, posting spa days, shopping sprees at in malls, and her new luxury SUV with captions like executive perks and building an empire. She couldn't spell developer but listed it on her LinkedIn. Lauren turned out to be a social media genius. She'd been screenshotting everything, creating a digital trail of Harold and Samantha's spending while the company was technically in financial distress. Every purchase made with company funds. Every 5-star dinner with no actual business. Every luxury trip written off as a corporate retreat. She had receipts for all of it. The timing was perfect. That very morning, Harold posted on LinkedIn about taking Jenkins Realty to the next level, posing in front of my mother's old portrait in the lobby, the same one he'd tried to remove last year because it was outdated. The comments section was already filling with congratulations from people who had no idea what was coming. Daniel reached out to me through Victor. We met at a small local diner downtown, the kind of place Harold would never be caught dead in because they didn't have valet parking. Daniel looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from fighting a losing battle for too long. He told me Harold had been cooking the books for years, moving money between accounts to hide personal expenses. But here's where Harold's ego became his downfall. He'd been so confident in his control that he'd put everything in writing. Emails directing Daniel to falsify reports, text messages about hiding assets, even a recorded phone call where Harold explicitly said the patents were technically company property now and Mom would never be smart enough to figure it out. With Victor's plan in motion, I made an anonymous tip to the competitors that evening. Daniel had the documents but had been afraid to act because Harold had dirt on him too. A minor tax issue from years ago that Harold had blown up into a potential career ender. But with my patent evidence and the contract on the line, Daniel finally had leverage. We coordinated our attack like a chess match. First, Daniel's forensic accountant would submit their findings to the State Contract Review Board. Then I would file my claim on the patents with the U.S. Patent Office, showing Mom's original work and my rightful inheritance. Finally, Victor would file an emergency injunction preventing Harold from signing any contracts on behalf of Jenkins Realty. The timeline was critical. The state contract final review was in days. Harold had already scheduled a celebration party at the country club, complete with catering and a band. Samantha had bought a $4,000 outfit for the occasion, posing with it on Instagram, captioned, "Ready for the big win." Harold's paranoia was reaching comic levels. According to office gossip, Lauren had infiltrated. He'd started making employees sign new NDAs every morning, installed keystroke loggers on all computers, and hired 2 different private investigation firms to watch each other. He'd even accused the janitor of being a corporate spy because the man had asked about the portrait of my mother. The irony was delicious. Harold, who'd built his empire on my mother's genius, couldn't even understand the basic code she'd written. He'd hired a team of engineers to maintain and update the systems, but none of them really grasped the elegant simplicity of her original algorithms. They'd been patching and bandaging problems for years, creating a mess of spaghetti code that barely functioned. Meanwhile, I'd spent my teenage years learning programming from my mother, understanding not just the what, but the why of her innovations. Harold sent a group text calling an emergency family meeting for the next afternoon at the house. Technically my mother's house, but I wasn't ready to push that button yet. The message was a masterpiece of manipulation. Need all family members present to discuss Emily's recent unstable behavior and its impact on our family's reputation. Coffee and pastries will be served. Unstable behavior. From the man who'd slapped me at my own wedding. It was absurd. The next morning, Harold called an emergency family meeting at the house. I arrived late on purpose, wearing my mother's favorite blazer and carrying her leather briefcase. The living room was packed, Aunt Evelyn looking uncomfortable, various cousins who'd driven in from neighboring states, my mother's elderly aunt, Laura, who'd flown in, and surprisingly, Patricia, whom Harold had apparently invited to witness the intervention. Harold stood by the fireplace like he was about to deliver a State of the Union address. Samantha sat on the arm of his chair in what I can only describe as business casual meets Vegas showgirl. A blazer with nothing underneath but a lace bralette. Because subtlety was never her strong suit, Harold launched into his prepared speech about my vindictive behavior following a harmless wedding toast. How I was trying to destroy the family business out of spite, and how he was considering having me evaluated for mental health issues. Just like your poor mother, he added with fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. That's when I opened the briefcase. The click of the latches was surprisingly loud in the hushed room. I pulled out copies of everything: the real will, the forged documents, the email evidence, the patent records, and a special surprise: Harold's tax returns showing he'd been claiming my mother's patents as his own inventions for tax breaks. But the real showstopper was what I'd discovered just that morning. Harold hadn't just stolen from me. He'd been managing Aunt Evelyn's retirement fund and had borrowed $200,000 for a temporary business investment that was somehow never repaid. He'd convinced cousin Ryan to invest his kids' college funds in a subsidiary company that existed only on paper. He'd even taken out loans using Aunt Laura's house as collateral without telling her. The room erupted. Aunt Evelyn, despite being 85 and usually sweet as pie, stood up and called Harold something I can't repeat here, but it rhymed with trucking faster. Ryan looked like he was about to throw up. Aunt Laura went pale, then red, then a concerning shade of purple. My cousin Nathan, bless his millennial heart, was live, tweeting the entire meltdown. His commentary included gems like "Uncle just got exposed harder than my freshman year Facebook photos," and "Emily came with receipts like a CVS shopping trip." The tweets went viral within hours. But we didn't know that yet. Harold tried to regain control, shouting about family loyalty and how I was twisting everything. That's when Samantha, sweet, vapid Samantha, made her fatal error. She laughed and said, "Come on, just pay them off like you did with that accountant last year." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Nathan stopped typing. Harold turned to her with pure panic. She realized her mistake and tried to backtrack. "I mean, the accountant you helped with his mortgage as a gift from the company." Aunt Evelyn, finding her voice, asked very quietly which accountant and why they needed to be paid off. Harold, stammering answer, told everyone everything they needed to know. Patricia, who'd been silent this whole time, stood up and walked over to me. I expected another lecture about bringing drama to her family. Instead, she said, "Emily, dear, I owe you an apology. I've misjudged everything. This man is a criminal, and you've shown more grace than I would have." Then she turned to Harold and added, "You disgust me. That slap at the wedding wasn't about Emily. It was about you being a pathetic, insecure little man who couldn't stand to see someone else happy." Coming from Patricia, who usually expressed strong emotions by slightly pursing her lips, this was the equivalent of a nuclear bomb. By late that night, our Ring doorbell started going crazy. Harold was at my front door, absolutely plastered. Not just drunk, but the kind of intoxicated where you think you can fight a mailbox and win. He'd apparently taken an Uber after drivers refused to take him to 3 other addresses, including his lawyer's house and randomly a Waffle House. He was pounding on the door, shouting that this was his house anyway, that my mother had promised him everything, that I was an ungrateful brat who needed to learn respect. He had a stack of papers with him, the forged will, some fabricated receipts, and what looked like a crayon drawing of a contract. The man had literally brought kindergarten-level forgeries to a legal gunfight. Thomas tried to reason with him through the Ring speaker, but Harold started threatening to break down the door with my garden statue, the one my mother had painted to look like a little fairy. That was the last straw. Our neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, had already called 911. She'd been watching the whole thing through her window and had waited years for a legitimate reason to call the cops on Harold after he'd complained about her wind chimes. The police arrived to find him trying to jimmy the lock with a declined credit card. Poetic justice. He immediately started shouting about his rights, how he owned this house, how I was a squatter. He shoved the forged documents at the officers, not realizing one of them was Officer Ramirez, whose mother had worked with mine at Property Dynamics years ago. Officer Ramirez took one look at the documents, noticed they were dated 3 different years in 3 different places on the same page, and asked Harold if he'd been drinking. Harold's response: "I've been drinking success. Officer, this is my house. I demand you arrest her for trespassing." Then Harold made the fatal mistake of trying to push past the officers to get to my door. That's when things got interesting. Turns out Harold had more than just alcohol in his system. He'd apparently taken what Samantha later described on her Instagram story as confidence pills, which I'm pretty sure weren't prescribed by any legitimate doctor. The officers cuffed him for attempted breaking and entering, public intoxication, and assault on a police officer. Though honestly, his attempt to push Officer Ramirez was more like an aggressive lean. As they were putting him in the car, he started listing all the important people he knew who would have their badges pulled. The list included 2 retired mayors, a fictional senator, and oddly, Judge Judy. While searching Harold for weapons standard procedure, they found a USB drive in his pocket. In his infinite drunken wisdom, he'd been carrying around the original files he'd used to forge my mother's will, including a Word document hilariously titled "Actual Will, Final This One." Patricia had been staying in our guest room since the family meeting. Not wanting to miss any developments, she came out in her robe and slippers to watch Harold being arrested. Sipping tea from my mother's favorite mug like she was watching a British drama, she actually waved at him as the police car drove away. The police report was a masterpiece. It included Harold's claim that he was a sovereign citizen who didn't recognize their authority, his attempt to bribe them with a company check he couldn't cover, and his final declaration that he would buy the entire police department and turn it into a parking lot. Officer Ramirez noted that the suspect seemed confused about basic reality. The local news had somehow already arrived. Mrs. Ellis might have called them, though she denies it while smiling. The footage of Harold being led away in handcuffs, still shouting about his rights and his house, would become what the internet calls an instant classic. Someone set it to circus music, and it got millions of views on TikTok. The courtroom was packed 3 weeks later. Harold faced Judge Eleanor Vance, a woman who'd gone to law school with my mother and had zero tolerance for document fraud. Harold's 4th lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The criminal charges were just the appetizer. The main course was the civil case, where Victor absolutely destroyed Harold's defense. Every forged document was examined, every fraudulent transfer exposed, every lie unraveled. Harold tried to claim he'd been protecting my interests, that my mother had verbally agreed to everything. Judge Vance asked if he had any witnesses to these verbal agreements. Harold suggested they could use a Ouija board to ask my mother. The judge was not amused. The verdict was swift and brutal. Guilty of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. The criminal penalties included 2 to 5 years in prison and restitution of all stolen assets. The civil judgment restored everything to me: the company, the house, the patents, and added damages for emotional distress, plus punitive damages for what she called particularly egregious abuse of fiduciary duty. Judge Vance addressed him directly. "Jenkins, you stood at this young woman's wedding and humiliated her, claiming she should be grateful for your charity. The only charity here was her mother's love for you. which you repaid with theft and betrayal. The court hopes you use your time in custody to reflect on the actual meaning of family. I took over Jenkins Realty the next day. The employees who'd lived in fear of Harold's paranoid management actually applauded when I walked in. I rehired his secretary with a raise and an apology. Daniel became my real business partner with actual contracts and everything legal. We got the state contract after all, once I proved the patents were legitimately mine. The company portrait wall got a makeover. Harold's photo came down, replaced with an expanded portrait of my mother. Underneath, I added a plaque with her favorite quote: "Progress requires vision, but success requires integrity." Thomas and I finally took our honeymoon to Hawaii as originally planned. But this time, with a much nicer suite, paid for by the settlement. Patricia came to the airport to see us off, bringing champagne and an apology card that made me cry. She's become fiercely protective of me now, telling everyone at her book club how her daughter-in-law is a CEO who took down a corrupt man with brilliant strategic thinking. Harold's prison emails started after a week. They went straight to my lawyer. He's apparently found religion, or at least found the chapel has air conditioning. He works in the library now, surrounded by books about laws he broke. Samantha tried to write a tell, all called Partner of a Fraud. But since she'd signed an NDA back when she thought Harold had money, she couldn't publish it without paying damages she couldn't afford, last I heard. She was dating a cryptocurrency influencer who definitely isn't running a Ponzi scheme. We redid the reception 6 months later. Same venue, same guests, minus Harold. But this time, with toasts that actually celebrated love instead of tearing it down. Aunt Evelyn gave a beautiful speech about my mother's strength living in me. Even Nathan managed to say something heartfelt without mentioning Twitter once. My mother's real estate software just won an Industry Innovation Award. I accepted it on her behalf, wearing her blazer, the one she wore when she first pitched the idea that would build an empire. An empire Harold tried to steal but could never truly understand. I keep one voicemail from that night of 101 calls, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. In it, Harold says, "You'll never be half the business person I am." He was right. I'm twice the person he ever was, because I learned from the best. My mother didn't just leave me patents and code. She left me the knowledge that true success isn't about taking from others, but building something that lasts. The company is thriving, the house is peaceful, and that's the real value I want you to take from this story. Family isn't defined by blood or money. It's defined by trust, respect, and justice. When someone betrays that trust, standing up legally and calmly, gathering facts instead of revenge, brings real power and freedom. You don't need to destroy anyone. You just need to expose the truth and let consequences do the rest. In real life, integrity wins, greed loses, and the people who truly love you will stand by you when the dust settles. If you're facing your own version of this, don't stay silent. Trust your gut. Keep records. And remember, the strongest revenge is living well while they face what they've done. Thanks for listening to my story. If it helped you feel less alone, that's all I wanted.